So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brian here. I'm a political economist at LSE, School of Public Policy, Department of Philosophy, Logic and Scientific Method. I studied the political economy of development and challenges of industrial policy. I'm also the director of the Hayek Programme here at LSE, which is co-organizing tonight's proceedings together with the Jobs Foundation. We encourage you to check out our future events. You may simply Google LSE Hayek Programme in Google to check them out. The aim of our program is to explore and advance the intellectual contributions of political economist F.A. Hayek. These include individualism and economic freedom, the importance of limited government under the rule of law, the limits of centralized planning in a world of great complexity. We want to change the conversation. In a world that focuses on redistribution, we want to focus on the prior question of production. At a time where economic stagnation, high taxes, and public spending are commonplace, we want to emphasize market-oriented growth policies. As such, it gives me great pleasure to welcome someone who has done a lot in recent decades to advance these ideas. Let me now introduce our panelists. Dr. Arthur Laffer, founder of Laffer Associates, is known as the father of supply-side economics. He advised both President Reagan and Prime Minister Thatcher on fiscal policy. In 1999, Time named him one of the century's greatest minds for creating the Laffer curve. He received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2019, the highest civilian honor awarded by the United States, for his contributions to economics. Joining the panel today is Matthew Elliott, graduate of the LSE and one of the UK's foremost public policy thinkers, having set up numerous policy campaigns, including Taxpayers Alliance in 2003 and overseeing 2 successful national referendum campaigns. He's the co-founder and president of the Jobs Foundation, and sits in the House of Lords as Lord Elliott of Micklefell. Dr. Laffer and Lord Elliott are co-authors of a new book being launched today titled Prosperity Through Growth, also featuring Michael Hintze and Douglas McWilliams. Completing our panel is our chairperson and moderator, Professor Luis Garicano, a full professor at the School of Public Policy. He was previously a professor of economics and strategy at the University of Chicago. Additionally, he has held positions as an economist of the European Commission and McKinsey & Company. His research studies the organization of knowledge, of talent, of specialization, and its impact on productivity and economic growth. He has a new book recently published by Princeton University Press titled Crisis Cycle, Challenges, Evolution, and the Future of the Euro. Dr. Laffer will first speak for about 20 minutes, followed by a panel discussion, followed by a Q&A with the audience, moderated by Professor Garicano. Do note this event is not live streamed, but it is photographed, it is recorded, and we put it up on YouTube in the coming weeks. We'll end at 8 p.m. sharp. Let us now put our hands together to welcome Dr. Art Laffer on stage.
Just for the record, I'm not very technically profound, so... Is it on?
Give you a napkin.
Can you hear it? No. It's on? You got it? Can all of you hear it now?
Yeah.
It's all right up there? I asked the audience once if they could hear me, and some guy in the front row raised his hand. So I said, can you hear me? He said, oh yes, I can hear you just fine. But I would be more than happy to trade places with someone who can't. Now, am I allowed to have a little fun with you today? Yeah. Is it all right? They've asked me to only speak for a short period of time, and I told Brian I've been short all my life, so I will. But coming over here, it's just such an honor. And I noticed on the back wall they have all the Hayek speakers, and the last 3 is Angelina Jolie, George Soros, and Larry Summers. My crowd. And also, yeah, of course, when you're a little nervous, and you know you are when you talk before the LSE, you guys are noted as being the premier economics department in all of Great Britain, just for the record. That's the reputation you have. I'm not saying it's true, but it's the reputation. So a little bit nervous, so I got here a little early, and I was wandering around campus and off there. You know, England is so cute, so charming. I mean, it's so old-timey, I just love it. And I was walking around, and of course, as a professor for all my life, and I noticed this little bookstore, wooden door. You know what I mean? The door opens, and I'm a sucker for a good bookstore. So I walked in, I opened up the door, and there behind the desk, sitting there looking at me, he had his glasses on, looking, over his glasses, looking at me, the proprietor of the bookstore behind his desk. And so I started the conversation. I asked him just very simply, by any chance, do you have Trump's latest book on how to deport illegal aliens? And he looked up at me and he said, "Get the hell out of here and don't come back." And I said, "Yes, that's the one. Do you have a paperback?" Sorry, I hope you don't mind me having. It's a very serious topic, Great Britain, the history. We have this book coming out, Prosperity Through Growth, which is a supply-side economics way of reinstating the prosperity Britain has had. As you may know, it was the beginning of capitalism, industrialism, all started here, and now it's sunk to a very low level. We hope, and I hope more than anything, to be able to at least give you all I've got, perhaps that could help you reinstate prosperity here in this country. And I'm just going to go through it a little bit with you, just to outline sort of what it is. And in macroeconomics, I like to look at imagine you have a big textbook on macroeconomics. And what are the 5 big sections of that textbook on macroeconomics? And this is the way we sort of partition the look at the British economy. You follow me here? And of course, the first grand kingdom of macroeconomics is taxation, my favorite. The second one is government spending. Third section is monetary policy, money. Fourth section, regulatory policy. And the fifth section, of course, is trade. And when you look at these 5 grand kingdoms, the way I like to do it is I like to take each of those kingdoms, and what I do is I try to define what the North Star of that kingdom is. What is the optimal policy for that grand kingdom? And then I ask myself, whenever I look at legislation, I try to take a balanced look. Legislation has so much in it. I try to sort of put my arms around the trunk of the tree and see, does on aggregate this piece of legislation move us towards the North Star or away from the North Star? And just to go through it with you fairly simply, and then I want to go through one area that's controversial that I'm going to scream at you about. But when you look at the first kingdom, taxation, you start off by saying all taxes are bad, but some are worse than others. The whole principle of taxation is, what you want to do is you want to have a tax policy that does the least damage possible to collect the requisite funds to operate government. You follow me? That's sort of it. And when you break it all down and look at it carefully, the basic policy here is on taxation is you want the lowest possible tax rate on the broadest possible tax base. So you provide people with the least incentives to evade, avoid, or otherwise not report taxable income, and you have the broadest possible tax base without the minimum number of deductions, exemptions, exclusions, credits, offsets, all that sort of nonsense, all sorts of loopholes. You get rid of as many as you can, so you have the lowest rate on the broadest base, so you have the least incentives for people not to report taxable income, and they also have the least places where they can stick income and avoid paying their taxes. You follow me on this? You with it? That's sort of the North Star on taxation. On government spending, which is sort of a fun area as well, what you look at, recognizing that all taxes are bad. Now, government has a very important role in this society. It has a lot that it has to do and should do. It's an integral part. A good government is an integral part of supply-side economics and prosperity and growth. They have the judiciary, the military, the police, the roads, the schools. There are lots of functions that government is far superior than is the private sector. But once you start getting to the fringes beyond that, what you want to do is you want to look at government spending here. Now, this is the North Star. What you want to do is where the last dollar of money spent has a little bit more, more benefit than the damage done by the last dollar of taxes collected, and that's the optimal size of government spending. And that's where you literally have there, anything above that will do harm, anything below that is harm as well. You know, when you think about government spending total, I think it was 1910 in the US when we became the preeminent economic force on earth. If you look at it, I think our total government spending was 3%, a little less than 3% of GDP. So when you look at it today, I would argue that moderation in spending restraint is probably the right thing. So you have a low-rate flat tax, low-rate broad-based flat tax, number one, North Star. Number two, spending restraint. That's the second star. You follow me there? You then look at the next grand kingdom, which is monetary policy. And of course, there's nothing that can bring the economy to its knees faster than unhinged paper currency and hyperinflation. It just destroys markets. It destroys all the ways of functioning together. So what you want to have is price stability, and you want to have assuredness of price stability, so you can look at the prices and have a long-term capital market form, again, to create the optimal conditions for economic growth. You want sound money is what I like to describe it. And if you look at it from the standpoint of sound money, and I'll just take you back on a little story. I mean, prior to 1913, the United States had a private money system before 1913. Now, it wasn't only private money, but the government did do three things in the U.S. The government defined what a dollar was. A dollar was 1/20th of an ounce of gold. The dollar was 1 ounce of silver. They defined what a dollar was. Then the government also had mints, so if you brought bullion in, they would refine it to its correct purity, and they would mint coins for you. They'd even use newtons, by the way, perforations on the edge. If you remember, that was Isaac Newton, as Chancellor of the Exchequer, who did that so you couldn't shave the coins. Cool stuff. You've done some pretty, I mean, Newton did that. That's sort of cool. The third thing that the government did prior to 1913 was it audited bank balance sheets and income statements to assure that they were accurate. And so we had banks that created bank notes, which they all had the same sort of format, but then it would be the liability of this bank, LaSalle National Bank, or whatever it may be. That's all it did, and that's the way the monetary system in the U.S. ran until 1913. Then the government trust started taking it over, started nationalizing money. 1933, Roosevelt, of course, as you know, declared private ownership of gold illegal, criminal penalties. So everyone had to turn in their gold to the Treasury. They paid him $20.67 an ounce for the gold, compensated them. And after having confiscated all the gold, Roosevelt then devalued the dollar and made it $35 an ounce. Biggest wealth tax that had been put in the U.S. ever. But that was it. Then the interest equalization tax, my dissertation, was on the voluntary foreign credit restraint program in the U.S. That was mine at Stanford. It then went on to the Smithsonian Accord. Now, I was in the White House then. I was George Shultz's right-hand person in 1970 through 1972. When we got off gold, we unhinged the paper currency. You then look to the present. Now, you have these two periods, nationalized money and private money. From 1776, I picked that number for your blessings. Just thought I'd, just, from 1776 till 1913, prices went up and down, they did that. But over that whole 130-year period or so, average price inflation was zero. Long-term bond yields were stable. This is from Jeremy Siegel. Long-term bond yields they went from about a little bit less than 6% in there, just didn't wiggle at all. There was no volatility in the interest rates for the whole period, just slightly sinking over that, creating a terrific long-term capital market. That was the period prior to 1913. Since 1913, they put in the government money to prevent catastrophes and crises and runs on capital and depressions. And of course, the first thing that happened, we had a Great Depression. If you look at the rate of inflation from 1913 to the present, price level has risen 35-fold in that whole period. I mean, these are the two systems there. So sound money is really a critical process here. And someday maybe we'll talk crypto with all of you. But Low rate, broad-based flat tax, spending restraints, sound money, minimal regulations. We all know we need regulations. We all understand that. You can't let some guy drive on the left-hand side of the road one day and the right-hand side of the road the next day. I mean, you've got to have regulations. But what you want to make sure on regulations is they don't go beyond the specific purposes at hand and create an enormous amount of collateral damage without any benefits. That's it. You know, minimal regulations, but making sure they're focused directly, and maybe a sunset provision in those regulations so they have to be renewed every so often. Low rate, broad-based, flat tax, spending restraint, sound money, minimal regulations, and then the final grand kingdoms, free trade, and trade. You know, I can't overestimate the importance of trade. When you look at the U.S. history, you and Holland funded us all the way throughout our entire history. As you probably know, we had all the Ricardian gains from trade, but we also had the Sidney-Alexander gains from trade of the resources being transferred, which combined with our labor and our raw materials created this huge economic growth in the United States. We all understand free trade is phenomenal. We all know the damages done by the Smoot-Hawley tariff in the U.S. and the copycats around the world. We all know the problems that Nixon did. I was in the White House then when he put the 10% import surcharge, when he denied foreigners access to the tax credit there. So we all know the benefits of trade. And my mentor, my partner for years and years in economics, Bob Mundell, I don't even know any of you know Bob Mundell, but we worked together a lot. For his comment was when he got the Nobel Prize in '99, his comment was, it was the Smoot-Hawley tariff that caused the Great Depression, and it was the Great Depression that caused World War II. That's a pretty damning criticism of protectionism. I can't think of anything more damning. Free trade is the answer, or freer trade. So these are the North Stars: low rate, broad-based flat tax, spending restraints, sound money, minimal regulations, and free trade. I'm not going to go through trade with you here, although it's a fun topic, and I'll maybe in a question or something. I'd love to go through. I'd love to go through trade with you, but I want to talk to you about taxation, and just one here in the modern version of taxation: redistribution. You know, my dear friends, Monsieur Thomas Piketty, he's on the wall back there too. Emmanuel Saez, you know, Emmanuel there. Honorary degree at Harvard. Guess he debunked the Laffer curve, just for the record. He got it for that, by the way. Gabriel Zuckman, you know, Sancheva, you know, all those Greek people. Then you know the political counterparts. The one I love most of all here, I just adored him, was Wedgwood Ben of the olden days, Neil Kinnock, all the old-timey ones that I used to have to deal with when I was a middle-aged man. And then, of course, we have the ones there, Bernie Sanders in the U.S., and Elizabeth Warren. You with me? You know, the comment is that income is unequally distributed. Everyone knows that, and it's true. If you look at the richest 1% and the poorest 1%, and you take that whole stretch, you can just see the huge income inequality. Now, you're not really sure what it all means because it's all based on tax return, but I'm not going to criticize the numbers. I think the Center for Income Inequality has done a terrific job on recreating the income tax structure of the United States from 1913 to the present, and I use all of their data, just for the record. It's Piketty and Saez's data I use because they're really good on the numbers. It's just the logic that they have a light problem. Let me go through the conceptual. To build a model, you need the model to be explanatory. You've got to get the framework for a model. It has to be explanatory. So when you look at inequality and you ask the question, can we make the inequality better through government policies? And that's the way of looking at it. And what they talk about is we need to do a transfer. And once you've done all the functions government should do, it's got it there, then you have a transfer. And by transferring resources from those who have a lot to those who have very little. You follow me there? Please. And I want to go through this with you very carefully because this is math. It's not opinion, because I could give a damn what your opinions are. And you should give a damn what my opinion is. This is about facts, not how you feel, okay? when you look at this, I'm going to go through the transfer theorem with you, which is critical to all of our thinking on macroeconomics. And the transfer theorem I'm going to use with respect to income redistribution. You take from those who have a little bit more, and you give to those who have a little bit less. You with me? This is the transfer theorem. This is the redistribution. You can see it in Piketty's book. We should have a wealth tax. We should have a high up taxes on, excuse me, I don't mean to mock French, but it is a mockable language. And then you've got something, you look at this. Let me go through the theorem with you. Whenever you transfer resources, you always reduce total output. Theorem. When you take from those who have a little bit more and you give to those who have a little bit less, those who have a little bit more will produce less, and those who have a little bit less will produce less. The theorem here is math. It's not opinion. You can be at Harvard, you can be at MTSU, you can be at LSE, you can be at Oxford, whatever it is. It's math, people. Whenever you take from those who have a little bit more, you reduce their incentives to produce, and they will produce a little bit less. Anyone? Now, by giving to those who have a little bit less, you provide them with an alternative source of income other than working, and they too will produce a little bit less. If you want to think of this just as the Slutsky equation, the income and substitution effects of the Slutsky equation, any good economist will know what that is, and it's just applying the Slutsky equation to macroeconomics. That's all it is. When you take from those who have a little bit more, they produce a little bit less. When you give to those who have a little bit less, they too will produce a little bit less. The theorem is whenever you transfer resources, you reduce total production, period. Now, the lemma from this theorem I'm going to describe to you. I'm not going to prove it to you verbally, but I'm going to describe it to you, and I think it'll be intuitive to you. The lemma from this theorem is the more you redistribute, the greater will be the decline in total production. But now what I want to do is the one I love most of all, is the limit function for this theorem. The limit function is just absolutely delicious. It's got Louisiana piquant sauce. It gets sparkly, the nose runs, the flavor goes, you're flush red. It's just delicious beyond belief. The limit function is, if you were able to redistribute income so that everyone came out exactly the same, there will be no income whatsoever. Let me prove this to you if I can. Now, how do you get everyone to come out exactly the same? What you'd have to do is you'd have to take everyone who earns above the average income and tax them 100% of the excess, bring them down to the average income. And everyone who earns below the average income, you'd subsidize them 100% up to the average income. That's the only way you can guarantee that everyone comes out exactly equal. You with me? Now, if you actually did that, if you actually taxed everyone above the average income, 100% of the excess, if you actually subsidize everyone below the average income up to the average income, I will stipulate today, Counselor, we'll all come out equal. It's zero income. The only way you can reduce income inequality is by reducing total production on all groups in the system. That is, now, that sounds extreme, but the only way you're going to have income equality across the board is if everyone is equally poor. The moment one of those people earns more money, you've got an unequal distribution of income, you got to stop that guy and take from him, and you go right back down. Now, that's the theory. You see the model, you see the explanation, you know the math, so I don't need to, I did it verbally, but you know the math. So then you have to go to the data, all right? Now, where is Brian Dimitrovic? Brian Dimitrovic and I, wherever you are, Brian, oh, there he is, way back up there. Brian Dimitrovic, Dr. Brian Dimitrovic, PhD, Harvard, history, chairman of the Sam Houston University History Department. And Dr. Gene Sinkfield and I did something that we used the Piketty Science Income Inequality Group there. We looked at the entire history of the U.S. income tax from 1913 to the present. Now, in 1913, the tax applied to 2 months, November and December. Highest tax rate was 7%. We really stuck it to the rich people on those guys. You know, there were 358,000 people who filed their tax return that year that were required to, out of an adult population of 62 million. A little teeny tiny group with a little teeny tiny tax. That was the initiation. It lasted for 3 years, and then pop, by 1917, they'd pushed the top rate up to 77%, and they'd increased the coverage from 358,000 to 6.5 million. Okay, the history of the U.S. Then, of course, after we had a pandemic, we had a war, and then after that, they lowered it. Woodrow Wilson said, you know, America, we love you, we won the war, we got rid of the pandemic, we're going to give you a gift. They lowered the highest rate from 77% to 73%. You're welcome. You know, and then it goes on, it went down to 25%, then it went back up to 63%, then it went up to 94% in 1944, then it went down to 82% right after the war, then it went back up to 91% under Eisenhower, then Kennedy cut it from 91% down to 70%, then Reagan cut it from 70% down to 28%. Not too bad, and then it's popped back up. We have a huge, huge repository of data. We have every single tax return, guys. This isn't a sampling. This isn't, oh, what might happen. No, this is precise. We know the last person in the top 1%, and we know the first person on the bottom 99%. We have every tax. Now, they don't tell us their names, because that's secret information of the IRS. But we have it all. We have the data. We know what happens when you try to redistribute income through taxes. And let me just tell you the results, and then I'll go to this thing over here. Every single time they raised the highest tax rate on the top 1% of income earners, every single time, three things happened. Number one, the economy underperformed. Number two, believe it or not, tax revenues from the rich went down every single time. They discovered loopholes. They discovered politicians could be bribed. They discovered changing the location, the timing, the volume of income, the composition. These guys aren't dumb, and they have the ways and means to really change these things. Economy underperforms, tax revenues from the top 1% go down, and the third thing is the poor got hammered. Let me just tell you, the poor did not do well during the Great Depression. They did not do well during World War II. They didn't do well under the Four Stooges, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, and Carter. What I like to refer to as the largest assemblage of bipartisan ignorance probably ever put on planet Earth. There. They didn't do well. What happens every time we've cut tax rates in the rich? And these are the data, people. Every time you've cut tax rates in the rich, what's happened? Every time you cut tax rates in the rich, three things again have happened. The economy outperformed, go-go 60s under Kennedy, the Reagan reform, Calvin Coolidge, I could go on and on and on, Trump, all that. Every time you cut tax rates in the rich, the economy has outperformed, tax revenues from the rich have gone way up, and the poor have benefited. Yes, it's true, income inequality increased, but income inequality increased with the poor making a lot better off than the rich were higher off. These are the results. So when you look at your economics, all I do is beg you to look at facts. Please look at facts. You guys here, I don't know how many of you are Brits, but you know, look at what happened when Gordon Brown raised the highest tax from 40p to 50p. Look at what happened. Look at the Exchequer. They had the Laffer section in the Exchequer 2 years later where they analyzed all the problems that occurred. Go look at it. Look at what happened to your own country. Look at any other countries. Look at the states in the United States. All I do is beg you, thank you very much for letting me say a few words. I love you dearly, and now we'll go off to this session. But thank you.
Thanks.
He's a pickpocket.
Thanks very much, Dr. Laffer. I think Dr. Laffer left things very clearly, but let me just remind you of the very pithily expressed principles of the North Star of the supply evangelism, of which these are the 5 commandments: low rates, broad-based flat tax, spending restraint, sound money, minimal regulations, free trade. End of story. You don't need to know more about policy. Now, I would claim that the biggest enemy of supply side, solid, careful supply side thinking like the one we read here is Peronism. Peronism, Mr. Perón, Argentinian strongman, was completely kind of destroying Argentinian economy over the decades of actually him and his successors through the opposite of free trade, the protectionism, interventionism, sharp regulations that allowed him to intervene arbitrarily, no spending restraint, high taxes. And I would argue, Dr. Laffer, that the biggest exponent of Peronism today is Mr. Donald Trump, with taxes that, with trade policy that is interventionist, high tariffs, arbitrary, changing left and right. Sound money, well, not sound money because we are intervening, trying to intervene in the Federal Reserve's policy making and even arbitrarily dismiss or change the composition of the board. No spending restraint, humongous deficits that will be increasing over the foreseeable future. Regulation that is arbitrary and that is far from minimal, is very intrusive. Probably trade is the most obvious one, but I would argue that the whole package is very far from the principles that you have eloquently expressed and defended all your life. What is your view on that judgment?
You got a big table full there.
You're five.
So can I pick and choose? You know, what I said, I thought I said, and I want to make sure. You look at legislation, and you ask yourself, does it move us towards the North Star or away from the North Star? And that's how I get my arms around the trunk of the tree to decide whether I like the. It doesn't mean that anything other than the North Star itself is bad. Please, there. So when I look at it today, look at it under Reagan. With Reagan, I mean, just for the record, we took the highest marginal income tax rate down from 70% to 28%. That good enough for you? I mean, we tried. We took the corporate rate down from 46% to 34%. All right. We took it down from 14 tax brackets to 2 tax brackets. We got rid of loopholes, everybody, all that we did there. I think that was a pretty good on that. If you look at monetary policy when we took office in January 20th, 1981, the prime interest rate in this wonderful country of mine was 21.5%. Paul Volcker was head of the Fed using a price rule as opposed to a quantity rule, which is what the Fed does now. We were able to bring that down to 7.5%. Really, I mean, government spending, we did increase defense spending, but non-defense did come down fairly substantially. And I look at regulation. I do want to go to Trump, trade with you, and I want to go Trump because you all know we had NAFTA with Reagan and there was no apologies. We cut tariffs, we cut quotas. I mean, he did. Every one of these presidents knuckles every now and then down to do something wrong. He put embargo on Japanese steel. That was wrong. Reagan did, and, you know. But if you don't nitpick, if you look at the big picture,
Right.
Let me go through Trump and trade. And Trump has cut the tax rates. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was phenomenal, I thought. Trump will get control of the Fed in the next 6 months, and then we'll see. But if it's Kevin Warsh, he understands the price will very well, would be a Volcker-esque, I think. You can see already the big, beautiful bill. We got a lot of stuff there that was good. Again, a lot of stuff was garbage in there, but the vast proportion was moving us towards the North Star, in my view. Regulation, we deregulated energy. Boy, you've seen what's happened to energy prices. Can you imagine what Britain would look like with cheap energy? And you have it all, you just don't do it. And we look at healthcare price transparency, and he has put the executive order in, which is wonderful. That's the biggest deal of all. But trade. The tariff man, I'm going to beg you here, and I'm going to beg, not implore, beg, get on my knees. You should take Donald Trump seriously, but not literally. If there are 7 mosquitoes, he said, there are 1 billion mosquitoes out there, you know. That's hyperbole, that's the way he speaks, that's what he does. On trade, and I'm going to tell you about a private conversation. He called me in 2019. I talked to him fairly frequently, and one-on-one, not in a group meeting. I don't meet him with groups. And he called me and he said, Arthur, I want to talk to you about trade and tariffs, please. Now, he called me in the evening, but I had not had my first bourbon. So I was clear, just for the record. Clear-headed, no. He said, I want to explain to you that I am a free trader. You know, I've known him for a long, long time. And he ran an international. Do you know any CEO of an international company who's not a free trader? I don't. They all are free traders. They hate government tariffs, blah, blah, blah. They just hate that stuff. And so when he said I'm a free trader, it made perfect sense to me that he is a free trader. And also, I told him that given the fact that you imported 2 foreign wives, you have to be a free trader. He did not laugh, just. And but then he went on in the conversation, and this is for you guys, and you can judge for yourself. This is mine. But he went on in the conversation is when I look at the world around, I see an issue of reciprocity. The U.S. at the end of World War II was very generous to the combatants, both enemies and allies. We rebuilt all this. My dad was on war production board, and we went in there. Our company here was Vanderbilt Products. We had the Van Wall racing car. Our family's driver was a guy named Sterling Moss here. Cool stuff. We did all this. We allowed these countries, all of you, to put protectionist barriers up for infant industry arguments to develop your domestic. Well, those barriers have stayed. Now you're prosperous. And if you look at the big countries of the world, this is Trump. If you look at the big countries in the world, we're by far the freest trade big country. We really are. We are the big. Now, you got the Isle of Man and Jersey, Guernsey, and Sark, and you got Monaco, and you got Hong Kong. Okay, take it. But big countries, we are by far the freest trade because of what we allowed at the end of World War II, and that has still persisted. That's a reciprocity issue. The next issue we looked at was flexibility. If you look at flexibility, back in the day, the Smoot-Hawley tariff, that tariff was conceived as an agricultural protection bill in 1925, I guess it was, 26, and went through the battled in the House for 4 or 5 years. Finally was passed by the House in the fourth quarter of 29, and then passed by the Senate right on. The House bill went to the Senate, passed, it was signed into law by Herbert Hoover on January 1st, I think, July 1st, 1930. Boom, it was very inflexible. It was a grant. To get a tariff in took years of hard slogging, and to get a tariff out, it was impossible. It was a rigidity in the system. Today, we have executive orders. I'll tariff you. I'll reduce your tariff. I'll cut your tariff back again tomorrow morning. This is a highly flexible system that's very different than historical. And the last one I want to touch on, which is really important here, is leverage. It is true. It is really true that there are no winners in a trade war. That's really, really true. There are no winners. But all losers don't lose the same amount. They don't. If the U.S. and Puerto Rico were the only 2 countries on earth, if Puerto Rico were 99% of GDP of the world, and U.S. were 99% of GDP in the world, and Puerto Rico were 1%, and we had a perfect Ricardian Alexander free trade system of resources, Puerto Rican exports were U.S. imports, and blah, 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 blah. All that stuff was perfect. We put on trade barriers. It would hurt U.S. companies. It would. But their market is basically 99% of their customers are American and only 1% are Puerto Rican. But Puerto Rican companies, 99% of their customers. So the damage done is highly leveraged. With this in mind, Trump said to me, Arthur, these countries are mercantilist countries. They're putting on tariffs, all sorts of stuff for local politics. The Japanese want to save those old-timey farmers growing rice there at huge expense. They don't realize that their tariffs on America are hurting their country. They're just mercantilists, the way Adam Smith wrote about it, Ricardo wrote about them, these mercantilists. All they care about is access to the U.S. market. So I'm telling you what I'm going to do. I'm going to threaten the living hell out of them with 50% tariffs, 100% tariffs, 200% tariffs. And I'm going to scare the bejabbers out of them until they come to the negotiation table, and I can then negotiate lower trade barriers with all of them. Great line. Okay. Well, we have a little bit of a record. In the first term, we had 5 major trade deals done. The USMCA, if you look at the USMCA, it clearly reduced tariff barriers, quotas, non-tariff barriers. It made it freer trade between the US, Canada, and Mexico than before. It did. If you look at the deal we did with Japan, same thing. It reduced tariff barriers. If you look at it, it did. His talk was very different. I'm the tariff man, but look at what he does. If you look at the deal we did with South Korea, or with Brazil, or with Colombia, all of those reduced tariff barriers in the 5. Now there's one story I'll tell you that's highly documentable, and you can check it, but he was at the G7 in Ottawa with baby Trudeau. I remember the old Trudeau. I couldn't stand him either. Oh my God. You know, he had to leave the meeting a little early because he was going to Singapore to meet with Kim Jong-un. Remember that one where Kim Jong-un said, I have a button I can push, and Trump said, I have a bigger button than you do. You know? And but Trump's comment to the other 6 there was, how many of you want nuclear war? It's relatively unpopular to the people I speak with, so would you forgive me if I leave this meeting a little bit early to speak with Kim Jong-un and try to talk, get the heat down and get Pete? He said, but I've got a deal for you. Before I leave, the U.S., and he was looking at the 6 of them, the U.S. is prepared at this moment to get rid of all tariffs, all non-tariff barriers, and all quotas if you guys will do the same. There was this, excuse me, see you, Donald, see you later. You know, my view of this world is he's using this as a negotiation tool to bring free trade to the world. I think there is some reason to believe that's the case. This is his conversation with me. For all it's worth, this is what I have experienced and why I believe that he's far from being the tariff man, far from being a protectionist. I think you're going to find this person negotiating with trade policies out of strength, out of the leverage that he does. I think already you can see what he's done with peace through strength, the same way Reagan did. You know, we're going to have the biggest defense budget ever, just the way Kennedy wanted it, just the way Reagan wanted it, just the way Trump wants it. Why do you have the biggest defense budget in the world? So you never will use your defense. You know, John F. Kennedy put it so beautifully. He said, the best form of defense spending is always wasted. Whenever you find yourself in a situation where you are required to use your military hardware and prowess, that is a clear sign you did not spend enough. You carry a big stick so no one wants to fight. And that is the whole purpose. The second part of peace through strength is that, hey, if you behave correctly and you're a good guy, join us, we'll get rich together, we'll do a partnership, we'll all become rich. The carrot is getting rich together, and the stick is a big strong if you do that. And I think this is what you're seeing, and that's all, this is all just plain old supply side economics. Economics is all about incentives. Reward those things you like, and discourage those things you don't like. We tax speeders to get them to stop speeding. We tax smokers to get them to stop smoking. Why then do we tax people who earn income? Why do we tax people who employ other people? Why do we tax companies that make great products at low cost? We don't tax them to get them to stop earning income. We don't tax them to stop employing other people. We don't tax them to make crappy products at high cost with lots of lobbying. We don't. We tax them to get the revenues. All right? But don't for a moment think that the same consequences don't occur with income taxes, employment taxes, and profits taxes as occur with taxes on speeding and cigarettes. Just don't. Sorry.
I thank you. I wish you. I wish you were right, but I do think the Europeans went to that Turnberry meeting hoping for a settlement along the lines you're enunciating, and we didn't get any of that. But anyway, I hope that's true. So let's pass to the UK. And Matthew is an LSE alum, which is we're proud of. By the way, who did you study here? Who were your mentors here? Who were your?
So I was here almost 30 years ago, from 97 to 2000 odd, and the principal at the time, director, was Anthony Giddens, who people remember was the third way guru. And this was the time of Tony Blair in number 10 and Bill Clinton in America and Gerhard Schroeder in Germany. So he was the big guy at the time, and Anthony Giddens was their sort of leader. So he was in charge of the university. And teaching me economics was Lord Desai, who I knew a little bit when I was at LSE. I got to know better when I was in the House of Lords, and he'd been there for many, many years. And of course, he's from the Labour Party. He sadly died over the summer. But he was always such a friendly and principled and, like Arthur, somebody who would really light up the room and explain economics beautifully. Different principles to Arthur, but different conclusions, but a great teacher.
So you've written this book about you gave an anecdote. Let me give you another one. I was on the losing end on the fight with you as many others, in the sense that I was, of course, against Brexit, and I say of course because I was trying to think before I came here. Have I ever talked to anybody who is pro-Brexit? And I think I have never, which tells you a lot about the bubble we live in. And one question. I don't want to go into Brexit yet. I want to think about the UK. The UK is a lovely country, and I live here because I adore it, and I think it's the best place that I know to do your work and do your life. And I think many people think that, and for many of us, we are kind of shocked and surprised that having it all, having the best universities, the human capital, the incredible, like the financial markets and good institutions, solid for many years, the UK is unable to grow. It's stuck. And if you are in favor of Brexit, you would think the one good thing that Brexit would have is, well, you can actually do many things that you couldn't do before, or that was part of the idea that the Brexit campaign was saying. I guess those things haven't been done. Why is the UK not working? You've together written a whole book about why it's not growing. What does it need to do to grow?
So when we looked at the book, the third section's on the politics of economic growth, and we spoke to 33 key economic decision makers, including 5 former prime ministers and 9 former chancellors and business leaders and people like Jamie Dimon and Richard Noddy, and asked them sort of 3 questions essentially. Why do you think it is that the UK's had low growth since the financial crisis? That was the first question. What would your policies be to turn things around and get higher growth within the UK? And finally, what's the politics? How do you implement these things? How do you make sure these decisions can be actually put through the bureaucracy in Whitehall and Parliament and local government to make sure these things happen? And on the first question of the reasons for low growth, they, aggregating their opinions, they identified uncertainty overall. So yes, for some of them they talked about Brexit, they also talked about COVID, for example, or the energy instability with the Russia-Ukraine war. So it's uncertainty overall was one of the key factors they talked about. But they talked about as well the fact that politicians didn't really have a plan and didn't really come into office, whether it was, dare I say, some of the previous Conservative prime ministers and chancellors or the current government with a plan for growth, like the North Star that Arthur was talking about. On Brexit, just to briefly defend it, I would say a few key points. First key point, if you look at the economic growth for the Western European countries from 2016 to the present, the UK has grown faster and further than the other countries. So the idea that we're sort of growing below par isn't happening. We're growing faster than the other countries, even though it's way below where it should be. First point. Second point, the UK is now trading more with the EU and with the rest of the world than it was before 2019 when we left. So I think all those factors, the idea of collapsing just isn't happening. But you are absolutely right. I think we could have done a lot more with the powers that we took back to the UK. And I think that's one of the things people look back at the, particularly Boris Johnson's time in office, being elected with that majority of 80 and coming in, and then we left the EU, and of course COVID hit. But over those years, there wasn't really a plan for basically, what do we do to maximise the potential from Brexit. And if anything, we drifted towards more of a European-style setup economically, spending going up, taxing going up, regulation going up, more regulation in the City of London. All this stuff happened, which drove down growth. So it's a lot more we can do.
So when you look at taxes, today the FT was criticizing the book, saying like, well, this was tried before, and if we were to lower taxes, the whole world would come to an end. What would you say? Maybe the two of you should answer. What do you learn from the Liz Truss experiment? What is the true lesson in your view?
Well, I would say
I would love you to also.
Okay,
comment.
I'll follow.
In a sense, yes, this was done before. It was done in the 1980s in the UK and the US, and they copied in many other countries. And really, when countries follow the principles within the North Star that Arthur talked about, they do see growth shoot up. That's true in the 1980s or when it's done in the present day as well. So, in a sense, yes, we do want to go back to this North Star of growth. We'd see growth go up in a big way. So.
But what is your evaluation of that moment when it was tried and the markets exploded and the whole, in the Liz Truss premiership?
So going back to Liz Truss premiership, I think the key thing about that moment in time was she came in and she didn't really have the full plan there in place, or indeed really think about the politics of it. What we try to do in the book is really think about what's the plan, the principles, what are the policies, the full policy package, not just taxation, but spending, regulation, monetary policy and trade as well. But then also, crucially, the politics of it. How do you implement these things in a sensible way? And what was quite striking, speaking to the former Prime Ministers and Chancellors, whether they're Labour or Conservative, they all look back, and none of them wanted to increase tax. They all thought we were overtaxed. All of them were concerned about the track we're on, and were very concerned that if we continue on it, growth will continue going down, and they wanted some sort of plan.
So on this issue of the fiscal space, it does seem like in most countries in the West, and even including even going as far as China, but everywhere from France to the UK to the United States to Italy, etc., we do seem to be kind of heading potentially to serious fiscal trouble, as we cannot seem to cut entitlements. It seems like, okay, whatever we do, just the pensions and all the expenditure on that side is just an autopilot going up and taking over everything. And that doesn't allow, it seems, for this kind of fiscal policy or more enlightened fiscal policy. Will you see, how do you create the space for this kind of fiscal, for some tax cutting? Is that possible, given the apparent tiny fiscal space and the risk of a bad fiscal shock, of a bond market vigilantes coming to hit you with a stick?
Can I, before I go on that a little bit, I would like to mention the two other authors of our book. Douglas McWilliams, right there. Ba-ba-bum, Douglas, if you'd say hello. And Lord Michael Hintze, right there. The D'Artagnan and the Three Musketeers, I think it is. Something like that. One Yank and three Brits, or whatever you want to call it, but it's great. I don't know what Liz Truss never put in a tax cut. How can you say that was a tax cut that cost that it didn't? You look at all of these things, and I just think that what Matthew just said is correct. I mean, you look at the record, you see what we did with Reagan, you see what happened with Thatcher. What do you want? If you don't like it, that's fine. I'm coming over here to give you a little bit of my experience in this world. If you don't like my experience, I'm going home next week. So I'm sorry. If I can help you, I'd love to. I'd love to see you guys get rich. But frankly, I've never heard of a country that has taxed itself into prosperity. Maybe I missed it in Econ 1 somewhere. Maybe your LSE economists can show us how higher tax would be better for the economy. I think it's pretty lame, to be honest with you. I've never heard of a poor person spending himself into wealth. Maybe I missed that in Econ 1 too. But you help me in this, please. You know, if it's not common sense, it's not good economics. Economics is all about incentives. If you tax people who work, and you pay people who don't work, Do I need to say the next sentence to you guys? Come on, help me. If you have two locations, A and B, if you raise taxes in B and you lower them in A, producers and manufacturers and people are going to move from to. Am I going way over you? Come on, help me, please. I beg to debate Piketty or Saez or Sanchez. I mean, any of them. They won't debate, of course. No, I have done Jamie Galbraith and the bunch. But they all, if you debate, I'm using their numbers for God's sakes in their center. They're really good at the numbers. They just don't know how to use them. That's all. And it as Larry Gatlin said, it ain't rocket surgery.
I was going to say, please buy the book. There's lots more in there. But one of the really fascinating things is looking at the US. And of course, that's like a perfect experiment, isn't it? Where you can actually look at the taxes between the states, the mobility of people between the states.
It's my book, The Wealth of States, 2014.
Buy this one first. But you see now people moving from California to Florida and Texas, don't you? Or to Nashville.
Me.
Which is the best one. But you now see it in Europe as well, where of course people within the UK are now moving overseas, moving to perhaps Italy, where there's sort of for 200,000 euros you can move there and not have your outside earnings tax and that sort of thing. People are moving, there's that mobility there. If you look at the former Soviet countries that have joined the European Union and compare them, which Doug did in the book, and looked at the experiment from leaving the Soviet Union to now, the ones with the lowest tax rates have grown the fastest and are now the richest. So again, there are lots of examples.
All right. We have now time for your questions. Please introduce yourselves. There will be a mic ready for you. Yes, we have a gentleman there, please, on the second row.
No, I just tell them to stand up. You got to get the mic.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a fantastic presentation from everyone. I'm neither an economics alumni or a LSE alumni, so this is very much a layman's question. But when you went through the book and you interviewed these 33 illustrious characters, what was the most counterintuitive thing that they told you that you thought, that's a great idea?
My thought was that with the 32 was it we looked at, we talked to, and I did a bunch of them with these, your fellow countrymen, and then I did the rest with Zooms with the other interviews there. I was amazed at the unanimity of the view. I was amazed at one of the things that caught me by surprise is their unwillingness to look at the elephant in the living room. When you look at this issue, there is so much virtue signaling going on that how could you ever support cutting tax rates on the rich when there's so many poor people? You know, it's this virtue stuff. And the living room, and what you'd have to do is just take this evidence, which Matthew and Douglas and Michael have really provided you, and just put it, how do you help the poor? Come on, look at the facts. That's what I think is the most amazing, but I do think there was great unanimity. I mean, there was differences there, but the politics was, you know what they'd say if I ran on lowering tax rates. I mean, your Chancellor of the Exchequer right now, Reeves, what's she going to do? Now, does she want to help this country? You know how to do it. I know how to do it. The East Coast knows how to do it. The West Coast, the North, the South, we all know how to do it. Is she going to do it? Or is she going to be posturing? And, you know, I think the posturing is the thing that really, really irritates me enormously on all of this. You're seeking virtue and approbation from your fellow countrymen by saying the right thing. Yeah. How many people in Britain, do you guys have a lottery here?
Yes.
How many people in Britain buy tickets to the lottery? Almost 100. Almost all of them are buying. Every Brit wants to be rich. Why the hell do you tax the rich if they all want to be it? You know, everyone understands the dream of getting richer. This is a lottery where everyone wins, but it doesn't sound good. It looks like you're a mean person. I think you just have to be a Presbyterian, frankly, to love rich people. As you can tell, I'm a Presbyterian. The Church of Scotland, lad. but you know, it is true. You know, you got to get them to look at the facts. How do you help the poor? John F. Kennedy, I thought, put it best. No American is ever made better off by pulling a fellow American down. And every American is made better off if any one of us is made better off. A rising tide raises all boats. And it's not the rich against the poor. It's not the blacks against the whites, the old against the young, the men against the women. It's not. We're all in this tub together, Britain and the US and the whole world. Come on. You need a tax system that the rich think is right and the poor think is right. You need to be, if it's not fair, the rich will take you to the cleaners. I mean, they have more money than you do. They know how to change the volume of income, the composition of income, the location of income, the timing of income they can do, and they have enough money to hire lawyers, accountants, deferred income specialists, favor grabbers. When you see a bunch of people hanging around with Obama, don't think for a moment that's street people trying to explain to him what it's like being poor. These are lobbyists from Goldman Sachs who are trying to figure out the next tax dodge they can put in, and they succeed. But if you made it fair, made a low-rate, broad-based fact, you'd find very little non-compliance. You'd collect your damn money. You'd be able to run the government well, and you'd allow the poor to be rich. And I'm going to say one last one. In Philadelphia today, single mother with 2 kids. She makes $29,000 a year income. Now, this is the law today in Philadelphia. She makes $29,000 a year income. You can look at her income, and you can calculate what she has to pay in taxes at $29,000. You get all the taxes, payroll, blah, 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 and you get her after-tax income that she earns. You with me? And at that level of income, she's also eligible for some welfare benefits programs there. In fact, I think we came up with 17 or 16 separate programs in Philadelphia that she's eligible for. If you take the after-tax income she earns, and if you take all the cash benefits, the value of the cash benefits of all the welfare programs she has, and you add the two together, you've got her total spending power at that level of income based upon her after-tax income and the eligibility of social welfare benefits currently in law. You with me? All of there? Now, this woman doesn't want to be a freeloader. She's got gumption, she's got drive. She doesn't want it. She wants to do it. So she really hunkers down. She studies at night. She does all this stuff, deprives herself, never takes a weekend off, and she gets the higher skill levels. And she gets in there and she finally gets her job. She so improves herself that now she makes $58,000 in Philadelphia. Congratulations, young lady. You've increased your income. You've earned it. You take her $58,000, and you go down with that $58,000, and you add up all the taxes. You take them out of there. Now, of course, the more you make, the more they tax you. So their taxes are higher, payroll tax, all that is, and you get her after-tax income. You with me? Then you look at all the social welfare benefits. Well, by earning this much money, she's lost her eligibility in her social welfare program. She has. She doesn't get anything there. So you add up all the social welfare benefits she gets from her social welfare programs, and you get the net cash flow there. You get to take the after-tax income she has. You take the social welfare, you put them together, and guess what? It's the exact same amount as it was at $29,000. This young lady trying to improve her life pays 100% tax rate on all the income from $29,000, and it's everywhere in the U.S. And I didn't even include unemployment benefits or anything else in that thing. It's called the poverty trap. When I went in with Reagan in the first, I said there are 2 places we have the way too high tax rates. On the rich, our tax rates are way too high, but on the poor, they're also way, way, way too high. That's why I wrote enterprise zones and tax cuts. Enterprise zones, which are free trade zones, where you don't lose all your tax. Well, if you look at this, this is how you have to improve the society. Let these people fly with their own wings. They're not dumb. They're not bad. They're not lazy. They're not anything. They're just like the rest of us, only we've deprived them of the opportunity of being able to prosper in this society of ours that they so rightfully and needfully deserve.
question there as well. Yes, just behind.
Thank you very much, Dr. Laffer and the panel. My name is Tim Barnes. I'm the director of an independent think tank called the Centre for Entrepreneurs. We obviously like to promote entrepreneurship. But I'm interested in this topic that you've just come onto and ask for an opinion, really, which is why, when so much of what you explain does seem straightforward and obvious, and indeed there is the history to prove that it works, why have we lost the ability to explain that to the public in general? Why does the public in general not have faith that this is the right way to go? And what do we do about that from a political side? And there's something here to do with philosophers and kings and economists and politicians.
It's a really interesting question. One of the biggest regrets that the political leaders had that we spoke to was that they were too short-termist. And they were always thinking about, when they went wrong, thinking about basically chasing the next day's headlines or what was going to be in the Sunday papers, and it was all extremely short-term. And in terms of their policy thinking, it was basically policy via polling. So basically looking, what's the polling say we should do, and following that as their North Star. Public opinion as their North Star rather than the principles of economic growth. And they all looked back and basically said, we wish we had longer-term thinking. We wish we actually sat there and worked out in opposition, where do we actually want to go with the economy? What's the plan for the first 5 years? Where do we want to be the country to be 10 years after that? What do we need to do tomorrow to make sure that 10-year journey happens? So it's longer-term thinking, I think, is the key to it. They agreed on the principles, but it's the application they recognised they were too short-termist.
Use my chess privilege before calling on the next person to think of out loud of that answer as well. I was a politician for a little while, and I had to negotiate a budget a couple of times. And I mean, I think that when you see what Macron is going through right now with his pension reform that he had to eat up, basically, I think the big thing that has changed from that time, Reagan's time and Thatcher's time, is that the welfare state has grown so much. And the voters are mostly the voters that have power to vote, and the ones that move the politicians are voters who are receiving money rather than paying money from the state. In particular, pension recipients are a very large number. In my country, in Spain, for example, a gigantic share of population here as well. And it makes any budgetary decision really fraught for the politicians. And we see Reeves trying to cut one little thing, which was this benefit cut, that was, I think, 100% of the economists would have said, yeah, that's a good idea. And she lost. She couldn't do it. She actually couldn't do it in her own party. So it's a different. If you look at the composition of the budget of the U.S. government or the U.K. government or the European governments today versus 50 or 60 years ago, it's a completely different animal. It used to be infrastructure and defense and investments of different kinds, and now it's a gigantic insurance company, and it's a different animal. It's much harder. It's a much harder thing to do. So some on this side, since we had two on this side, let's take that one there, and it would be great to have a lady since we had two gentlemen.
There's a lady in the back.
There's a lady in the back, actually. Let's go there. Well, okay.
It's been
That's okay. That's okay. It's already there.
Thank you. It was just to bring up the last point you made, that we've got a private sector that has been hammered all the time through higher taxes and higher regulation. And we've got an expanding welfare state and an expanding national health service that is now close to unaffordable. And no matter how much money is thrown at the health service, productivity not only doesn't rise, it either flatlines or declines. So how on earth do we tackle this dreadful doom loop?
On the NHS, I'm going to park that issue. Buy the book, we've got some stuff in there and that. On welfare, very simple thing. These how you can do small change to make big differences. On welfare, the key thing is to bring back in-person checks. During COVID, it all became telephone consultations, the right telephone consultations, and that's led to a big increase in the fraud. Bring back in-person checks, that could actually bring some savings in.
Lady in the back, please.
Thank you. My name is Anna. I want to say I finished chapter 1. It's a great book. I'm really big into risk analysis, and I wondered, have you identified any potential risks or downside of the North Star strategy, or could you just say it doesn't get worse than this?
I mean, it does get worse than this. You can get worse than this, but you can get a hell of a lot better too. And I think what happens is you've got a generational thing of re-educating people. You know, back when Reagan was from January 1st, 1983 to June 30th, 1984, when the tax cuts took effect, in that 18-month period, what was it, a year and a half? 18 months, 6 quarters, U.S. real GDP grew by 12%. It grew at an 8% per annum compound rate. You know, by the time we hit mid-84, we won the election with 49 states. The word liberal was a criminal offense, calling someone that. That was really a bad word, you know. It's just a new generation. We've sunk again. We had 25 years of phenomenal. Bill Clinton, I voted for him twice. I've been with Democrats, by the way, more. I did Jerry Brown's flat tax when he ran for president. So it's not that I just love them all if they cut taxes. I don't care if you're tall, short, gay or straight, black or white. If you like tax cuts, you got a seat in my tent, you know. And I think we're just coming to a natural cycle here. And this book's going to lead it off. And with Matthew's terrific leadership on all of this, we're going to convert Britain, and Britain in 10 years, 15 years is going to be back to where it was with the Industrial Revolution, creating capitalism, prosperity, and being the lead country in the world, right?
Correct.
Okay, let's go up so that everybody gets a chance.
Don't they worry up there about that thing falling?
They are on the right, the gentleman on the right, yes.
Thank you very much for the talk. And my question was about the fourth bucket you mentioned, which was regulation. And in particular, Professor Garicano, your co-author, Dr. Cochrane, has written about this, that when you see some costs in the economy, you tend to slap on a regulation in order to fix that. And then it just becomes a cascading sequence where the first regulation creates distortions, you slap on something else, and so on and so forth. How do you target the so-called original sin regulation? How do you find it, and how do you then eliminate it without causing more distortion? Thank you.
Yeah, well, we've done it twice so far in the U.S. Once under Reagan. I don't know if you remember the one where he had the whole box of regulations. He dropped it. He'd hurt his back trying to pick it up. And you know, we had huge deregulation there. When he came into office, he fired the air traffic controllers. He deregulated energy right on the spot. You can see what happened to independence. All the drilling rigs came into the U.S. The same thing with Donald Trump. I think when Trump took office this time, when he took office, I think the price of a barrel of oil was $90. It's now $56. I mean, and it's going way further. I got fired from the board of Occidental Petroleum for saying that I thought the price of oil was going to fall. You can do it. Just do it. You know, there's no reason. The one I want to see done is price transparency, healthcare price transparency, so you know what the cost of a healthcare service is, and what the benefits are, and you choose. I mean, you know, you choose whether you want the health care or not. You choose where you live. You choose the food you eat. You choose the schools you send your kids to. You know, what's wrong? I mean,
So to give one idea to the people in the audience that I think it's an interesting idea. An Argentinian economist, Federico Sturzenegger, a macroeconomist, the co-author of our dean, Andrés Velasco, worked during 2 years for a candidate in Argentina who didn't make it to the presidential election, with a team of 2,000 people that looking through every regulation in Argentina, trying to figure out which regulations should go. It's very much a matter of detail. Sometimes it's really hard. You really need to understand exactly what's the detail that is really the killing one. And his candidate lost, and he approached then recently elected President Milei, and he said, hey, I have a list of stuff that needs to be cut. And Milei said, sure, you can be my minister and you can just start cutting. So my answer is
Sturzenegger?
yeah. So my answer to that is part of it is you need to do your homework. So economists tend to say, oh, we like labor supply and we like, you know, and we sometimes don't do the work of figuring out exactly what's the real, but like you see, but say, what's the real thing that is messing everything up. You need to understand, you know, if you want to change, for example, the UK, you cannot build anything. I mean, there's been, the land rules are insane. You need to understand them in order to figure out exactly what is it that is making building impossible. And I think the homework helps. As a professor, I guess you would expect that from me. I have a question here in the very front.
My name is Mike Salem. I'm the UK Associate for the Consumer Choice Centre. I was once a student here, the secretary of the LSE Hayek Society. And in fact, the Laffer curve was introduced to me in this exact lecture hall. So it's good to see the author of the curve being right in front of me. Dr. Laffer, you've mentioned the poverty trap, and I think it's a very important point to talk about the attitude. The poverty trap.
Oh, poverty trap.
Yes, yeah. So, in your experience, are there any economic models, or does history show there's been a successful alternative than welfare to try and help the poorest of people? Because I think, in terms of inequality concerns, that's what people worry about the most. So how do we care? Charity, perhaps, all that. And Lord Elliott, what is your advice to the current government that thinks public spending will achieve prosperity and growth through multiplier effects? Thank you.
Can I just do the first and then flip it right over to you? I mean, the best form of welfare is still a good high-paying job. And if you don't create the possibility of generation, what you do is you create the very problem that you're trying to solve. And that's what you want to make sure you don't do. You want to make sure that the people you give the welfare to, that is not you're causing them to quit work so they can get the welfare. That's what you don't want. And Kennedy had it right, and he did it, and we had the wonderful period of growth. The rest.
The rest. How do you get to prosperity? You certainly don't do it by increasing taxes and spending, which basically choke you off the economy. And it should be made clear that's not just the current government, it's basically what's been happening over the past sort of several years, decades in fact. And what we're now seeing is basically, just look at the past year, you know, employers' national insurance going up, the number of job vacancies is going down, the Employment Rights Bill is coming in. Again, the number of available jobs is going down. So if you really want to make people feel prosperous and for living standards to go up, you need businesses to be growing and creating jobs and providing great training for people. And that requires a more free market approach.
Can I add one in there? We did one with Reagan, and it's a serious one. No one looks at the elephant in the living room, but Social Security. You know, we have a big situation in the U.S. We have a huge Social Security system that was put in 1937. The tax rate in there, you know it there. What's happened is we had a huge unfunded liability in our Social Security system when Reagan came in. He commissioned Alan Greenspan to do a white paper. And what you have to realize in Social Security is that people's longevity has been increasing. People work less and they live longer, so they've gotten more and more benefits. And the very simple thing you did, you took a sharp pen, you took a magnifying glass, you go in, we extended the age of retirement from 65 to 67 and a half. We taxed Social Security benefits, 50% of them, just the way we did private pensions. We eliminated the unfunded liability on the spot. I can take, if you give me a sharp pencil and a magnifying glass, I can take care of all of your unfunded liabilities in a long weekend, and you won't even know the difference. You won't, but you can take care of them without having them go into the wall and crash. You don't need to do that. And all of these programs, once you get them under control, then all of a sudden, all this spending just go on, and you don't even know it. And you know, please just, you know, I'm 85. My dad retired at 65, and at 65 he should have retired. He was old. I'm 85 and I'm working full-time every day, and I'm not old. You know, it's a different world today. And, you know, recognize the world for what it is and let the system, the policies, be there. And make your Social Security system, make it incentive-based, make it private accounts, privatized accounts, so that if you put $1 in, your expectation is to getting $1 out later on. Private accounts do that very well. Today, if you put $1 into Social Security, the probability of your benefits being increased is 0. There's no association between what you put in and what you get out as an individual. And you want to make those incentives match. You know, it's just common sense. The one irritates the living bejabbers out of me is an independent Fed. How stupid is that? I mean, if you have inflation in your country, who bears the consequences of it? The government. They don't control the Bank of England. They don't control the Fed. These guys can do anything they care about, and it damages. You always want to match authority with responsibility with consequences, period. And so you can control that. And all it is just putting common sense incentives back into place. And once you do that, you can solve these things amazingly.
You know, economists have been worrying very much about politicians' incentives for printing money.
Well, I'll do the one. Can I do one on politicians? All politicians, I've never heard of a politician dying poor. They're going to make money, people. Believe me. What you need to do with politicians is reward them for doing good things. My view on how to solve the problem is put all of your politicians on commission. No, seriously, if the U.S. economy grows at 3% per annum, give them their pay. If it grows at 4% per annum, they get double their pay. If it grows at 5% per annum, they get triple their pay. If it grows at 2% per annum, no pay. If it grows at 1% per annum, they owe you the money they would have. They'll never vote for somebody.
I have a question there in the back.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to pick up on the last part of your title with regard to AI. And I think everyone will agree we're in a kind of once in a generation kind of transition here. And I just wonder, how much do you think the playbook from the past is appropriate for the future with this revolution?
This should be Douglas McWilliams, but go ahead, Al. It's your shot.
Sure, on the AI side of things. We look at that in two ways. First of all, the effect it might have on productivity, both in the private sector but also the public sector as well, and how that might drive up productivity. But also in terms of tech more generally, how it's increasing mobility. And that's a great thing that's happened since COVID, of course. People have got used to working elsewhere. And of course, now, sadly for the UK, people are very used to sort of working from Italy or Portugal or Dubai, should we say. So there's a huge problem if we have taxes where they are now of people leaving the country. So we look at the combination of AI's effect on productivity, but also the effect of tech more generally in terms of mobility.
All right. We have a professor on the back.
Thanks very much. Wonderful, wonderful presentation. Can I just ask a question about universities? If you go to the Age of Reagan conference in the Simi Valley, you'll get a community again of low tax, high growth activists. But universities today are not necessarily places where you hear the mantra of low taxation or growth. Can I just ask the panel, what's their views on, are universities doing the right job to make sure that ideas about growth and ideas about a minimal state are equally present in education as ideas about statism and high taxes?
This is my baby, if I can.
Sure.
Half my life I've spent in the university. I ended up as Charles B. Thorne Professor at USC. Universities are socialist organizations. There is no such thing as a conservative professor. It just doesn't exist. If he were, he would quit and work and get some money. And when you look at it, also universities are the biggest ones on the dole in the world. I mean, all contributions to 501c3s in the U.S. are tax deductible. Therefore, you can actually make money by giving to a university there. Likewise, all earnings from the pension, from the trust, from the endowments of universities are also tax-free. So they live in a tax-free. Do not expect universities to understand incentives whatsoever. My latest recommendations to the president is that he should eliminate all deductions for 501c3s, except churches, because that's in the Constitution. But other than that, they should not be. If you give to a university, give your own money. Don't give the tax dollars. And the other one is they should all be taxed on that. And you would very shortly find the universities behaving in a much more competitive, proper way. But that is the truth. The universities are the bedrock of socialists because there are no incentives there. The difference between the highest professor pay and the lowest professor, it's minimal. I mean, it really is small. They argue about whether they have a corner office or a good parking space.
So Alexander's question, I think it would be...
Did I get you or not?
I want to give an ad for the LSE. Actually,
yes,
from my experience, albeit 30 years ago, but I'm sure it's the same now. I was actually really impressed when I was here that actually I argued my case. I was pretty much a free marketeer then. I was also in the Hayek Society. I can see Oliver somewhere. over there, current president of Hayek Society. And I argue my case, both in the philosophy classes and economics classes with Lord Desai. And I found it here, they liked you arguing the case, as long as it's based on fact, which was thought through, they liked that. So it wasn't necessarily always left wing.
Yeah, glad to hear.
But it's not arguing the case, it's getting it done.
Yeah.
It's getting it done, get it in there. You got to fight on the ground level to get this stuff in. You can't sit there and give a good speech and then go sit down and, well, I'm a great professor. No! You got to get in there and fight the battle to get the literally legislation through. The work I did with that, I mean, you got to get it done. There's no substitute for success.
Hi, I'm Rose, and I'm pursuing fashion buying and merchandising right now. So I'm really interested in how the economic policies work in the creative industries. So as we know, the fashion industry relies on the 4 pillars, which are product, price, place, and people. But small creative businesses often struggle with pricing and production due to economic struggles. From your perspective, what kind of fiscal or environment best supports young entrepreneurs in industries like fashion?
Matthew's got to get this one. I'm sorry, I'm old, hair in my ears, and high-pitched voice. I didn't hear a word.
So I'm not an expert on the fashion industry, but one thing we do look at in the book is basically small businesses and entrepreneurs and how you incentivize enterprise. And you're absolutely right when it comes to the taxation side of things. Yeah. You need to make sure that those entrepreneurs who put their life on the block and often mortgage their homes are properly rewarded for the efforts they put in. And sadly, if you go back to Tony Blair's time, he was actually very generous towards entrepreneurs and gave them the right incentives to actually set up businesses. That was a great thing, led to a lot of growth. And those have been scaled back over the decades since. We should go back to a sort of Blairite policy on that. In terms of labour and staffing, having set up a number of organisations and not businesses but organisations, I'm very conscious of the overall cost of employing somebody. So it's not just the salary, of course, it's the employer's NI and then think about the regulation and what have you. And I think one of the striking things now is it's extremely costly and there's huge regulation about employing new people. So when you're a small business, making that first crucial hire or those first few crucial hires, getting entrapped in the web of bureaucracy is so easy. So I would say cutting a lot of that bureaucracy on smaller companies would be a great thing.
Right, so we take a very last question, I think. We're just out of time.
Cool, thank you very much. A really great panel. I'm looking forward to reading the book. Maxwell from the Adam Smith Institute used to be president of the Hayek Society as well here. My question is, how do you deal with malevolence in tax policy and economics? Because when we hear a lot of the debates around wealth taxes and whatever else, it's about anger and getting, taking what is deserved by the people from the wealthy. How do you quantify or, rationalize with those thoughts, and how do you overcome them?
I mean, I don't rationalize it. Hate has never been a good model. It's never been a good way of solving problems. It's not black against white. It's really, we're all in this time. If you don't get a tax code that the rich think is right and that the poor think is right, you're going to have problems. Now, there are malevolent people in there. That's why you need a police force and an audit and an IRS. But basically, you need a tax code that everyone agrees in a democracy is the right way. If you make 5 times as much as I do, you should pay 5 times as much in taxes. Rich people believe that, and so do poor people. They're perfectly willing to pay their taxes fair and square, as long as you're not trying to rip them off. And if you're trying to rip them off, they'll go right back at you. And they'll win, you'll lose, because they're richer and you're poorer, and they'll buy more politicians than you will.
So I think we have to finish right on time. Thank you very much. Alexander Evans was... Alexander Evans was talking about the importance of diversity in views, and we have heard half of the audience is from the Hayek Society. So thanks for the Hayek Society for organizing and for having us. Thanks to Dr. Laffer. I hope most of us are half as sharp when we are 85 years old. And thanks to all of you for being here. Thank you.
Great, thank you.